Take the unemployment question, it is growing. Take the income disparity in each country and between the countries. They are unable to solve it. Take the question of corruption, that is aggravating and it is coming from top to bottom. All these social problems are accumulating and there is no solution under the regime of the market economy. That's a fact coming to the present situation. And after the 2008 crisis, even though big private sector firms were bailed out, the governments who bailed out these private sector establishments have themselves put into big debts. Now the sovereign debt has become the big issue in the world, and because of the sovereign debts, even who doesn't agree with Marx's findings comes to the state of thinking that restructuring of the state itself will be necessary. Such things are coming up in the situation. In this particular situation, if anybody views the changes in the system won't come up, the system of the market economy will sustain forever, that will be a wrong understanding of the situation. On the other hand, we should have an understanding that the system is amenable to change and it may give way to other social systems, including socialism. What is its forms? I am not now going into those details, but such is the world situation. In such a world situation, we have to consolidate the gains of the Kerala's state enterprises and sustain the gains for the future. With these words, I conclude, and I'm thankful to the organizers of this seminar for inviting me to speak to you. Once again, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Ravindranath. Well, it's time to sort of do a very brief commentary on the presentations, but I will refrain from summing up that for two reasons. One is that I have already taken much of your time in my first presentation, and second is that we are slightly behind schedule. But all the same, I would actively encourage you to interact with the very distinguished panelists sitting here this forenoon. Yesterday, after two sessions, we didn't do that, but I would now strongly urge you not to lose the opportunity of interacting with such a distinguished panel. So if there is anybody who would like to ask a question or make a comment, please do not hesitate. Yes, sir. Please. Sir, you are at the front. Yeah, please pass on the mic.
Thank you very much, Chair. My name is Thiruvananthapuram from Zambia. I'll ask a question which probably is very undiplomatic, and I assume that being at an international conference, I'll be protected within as long as I'm in here. Do I get that assurance, Chair? Very good. The Chair seems to be silent, but I'm sure the yes says yes. Okay. Oh. Well, no, I'm saying, Chair, that I will ask a question that may sound undiplomatic, so I get your protection. The question I'm asking is that clearly the philosophy behind state ownership in Kerala is because of the political ideology of the government. Suppose at the next elections, there is a change of government. That's where the diplomacy stops. Suppose there is a change of government. How do we know that the next government will still continuing with the same type of very strong-willed presence in business? Is there such an assurance that even if the government were to lose next elections, and I'm not saying they will lose, they will probably win, but if there was a change of government, do you see everything which has been said in the last 2 days continue? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. That's a very tricky question to answer, but let me try. In a democratic system, the political leadership gives us the direction in which we should function. No doubt about it, no question about it. Having said that, I made it in my presentation that in this state, there's a very strong public support for public sector, state-owned enterprises. I haven't seen that kind of an emotional attachment with the state-owned enterprises in any other state, as probably maybe Bengal we could compare. But in no other state you could see so much emotional attachment with the state-owned enterprises. And if there's anything which is so unpopular in Kerala, that is any attempt to privatize. So my feeling is, it's just I'm guessing, my feeling is whoever comes to power will not try privatization unless it's absolutely essential or it is if there are no other options. So by and large, since the state-owned enterprises have been nursed back to health, I would think this trend may continue, may even get strengthened. I mean, it's just a guess. Nobody can be 100% sure on the future. Thank you. One more, I think we can take. Sir, one more question going up there, sir. Thank you.
I just heard Professor Chandrasekhar saying that bottom line should not be the criterion for measuring the performance of public sector. I would like to say that government's function is to govern, but having decided to start a business enterprise, I think we should not be apologetic about it. A business is a business and it has to generate profit. And unless it generates profit, it is not sustainable. Like what my friend from Africa said, the next regime, what is a guarantee? They will continue with an unprofitable business. Therefore, I think let us make it very clear that state-owned enterprises also should make profit, and profit should be measured by way of the return on capital. Because the capital is very precious, and capital has a multiplier effect. With 100 crores, you can start a project for 300 crores, which will provide a lot of employment and create value. Therefore, I would request Professor Chandrasekhar to respond to this observation of mine. And second point is, Mr. Balakrishnan, in his presentation, nobody would have noticed, the last item is intelligent vigilance mechanism. He has very intelligently put it because he is a public servant still. And I feel that the vigilance mechanism should be the same for public sector and private sector. There is no question of a public servant after 10 years or 15 years facing prosecution for something he has done. The classic case is one of our own very senior officers, what he is going through at the national level. Let the economic laws be equally applicable. For economic offenses, there are laws in this country. They should be equally applicable to both public sector and private sector. There cannot be a separate law for the public sector where public sector managers are exposed to prosecution for business decisions taken. And unless they are encouraged to take business decisions, we cannot be more efficient, we cannot make profits, we cannot create employment. Thank you. I don't expect Mr. Balakrishnan to respond to this, but Professor Chandrasekhar should.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Well, first I must say I fundamentally disagree with the view that government should be in business to set up business enterprises. Because if that is the logic, and I don't think that is the logic, then I don't think the government should set up business enterprises. Leave it to the capitalists to set up business enterprises. Why should the government do that? However, I do think that there are a number of circumstances, and very briefly I'll give you two. One which I mentioned. The reason the state enters into productive activity and service provision in most instances is not because of the fact that it wants to substitute for or displace the private sector, but because of the fact that the private sector is investment shy, given the fact that these are areas which are characterized by large-scale lumpy investments, long gestation lags, low returns. We are not in a world where rates of return equalize across sectors, and therefore, if the private sector finds the rate of return somewhere even positive 2% and somewhere else 10%, it will not go to the area where it is positive 2%. And those could be sectors where if capacity is not created, actually the process of industrialization and economic development can be substantially hampered. So the first thing I'm saying is that the state enters not because of the fact that it consists of a set of aspirant businessmen who want to set up enterprises. It enters because of the fact that just as much as it has to provide schooling, because the private sector beyond a point will not provide reasonable schooling of good quality at cheap enough prices, just as much as it must try to alleviate poverty, because you can't alleviate poverty for profit, there would be certain kinds of investment which the state will have to make because that's necessary for development and it will not be made by the private sector. But just to conclude, there are other reasons sometimes why the state, for example, there's a huge national textile corporation. When 13 mills closed down in Mumbai city, one of those mills was Empress Mills of the Tatas. And I still remember reading the Economic Times of that point saying, Tata's with its tremendous management capabilities, why did it actually let this enterprise go to seed? And that is because it was Tata's strategy. Long time back, Hazari pointed out that big business groups keep dormant certain enterprises because they want to take the surpluses out of those enterprises and invest it in areas where rates of return are higher. Which means what? Capital in this country can exit. Labor can't exit because of the fact that there are not enough jobs, and the state cannot exit either because it has to mediate and keep in mind the interests of workers. It is not taking over the National Textile Corporation because it wants a business enterprise. It is taking over the National Textile Corporation because of the fact that it has a responsibility to its citizens, including the workers in those mills, whom Tata can actually say, I'm not interested in.
Sir, I'll just try to answer about the question about vigilance. I did make a mention about that. The fact remains that India, in various studies index, comes out as a very corrupt country. There's something which is bothering all of us, and we should rightly be bothered about that. Two, there are also fairly high levels of corruptions in many public enterprises. And there's no point in denying that. But what is happening is, today with new legislations like Right to Information Act and various disclosures, these are all becoming probably more transparent, and I hope corruption will come down. Also in Kerala, I would especially like to congratulate the trade unions, especially the CITU, because they have taken a stand openly against corruption and they are blowing the whistle. You know, the best person to probably blow a whistle against corruption is a person who is inside the organization. And if you have, trade unions, and similarly maybe the officers, organizations, if they take the responsibility of blowing the whistle, I think that is probably the best medicine against corruption. Now, having said that, the other point you said, I 100% agree with you, sir. I don't know how many of you know that the definition of corruption in a public enterprises includes causing loss to a company. That is, if in a commercial transaction, look at any private sector company, You make 10 decisions, Mr. Radhakrishnan made that point today. You make 10 decisions, 9 may be right, you have made 10 million, 100 million profit, and one decision is wrong, and you can be prosecuted for causing loss to the organization, because causing loss to the organization also is included in the definition of the corruption, because you don't have to be personally benefiting from that. You don't have to help anybody to get a personal benefit about that, but just causing loss is also included in the corruption. So I fully agree with you, sir. We need to have a level playing field with here. Unless you measure corruption in the same level in both public and private, managers in public sector will be more and more reluctant to take decisions which they feel may boomerang in one day. Well, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I would have been very happy to allot more time for the discussion, but we are running short of time. Once again, a very big thanks to all the panelists and all the delegates. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Sri Balakrishnan. We thank the discussants as well, Professor C.P. Chandrasekhar, Mr. E.K. Padmanabhan, Dr. Mridulipan, Dr. Sharad Kumar, and Mr. K.N. Ravindranath. As we are running behind the schedule, we start the next session right now.